I found a phone at night, and the story I found in it has kept me up at night by Throwaway Prey. This was seemingly written by a girl called Alyssa. From what I can tell, she was in her mid 20s and has an incredibly harrowing tale. The phone I found this on was damaged, so I had to reconstruct some of the bits, break it up a little. It is a more digestible read. I decided I need to post this, just in case if anyone knew something similar to what Alyssa had to deal with. I need to tell you something. As I write this, my hands are trembling slightly, and I just can't shake the sickening feeling in my stomach. I just need to tell someone about this, and you'll do. I have a friend, or at least I had a friend, a few years ago, on my university course. He was clingy, odd guy who was quite excitable and hyperactive, to a certain degree sometimes. His name was Ed. He was a good guy, I thought, at least. He would pay for everyone's meals when he was out with friends. He would bring snacks to share when you'd invite him over. Offer constant support, always finding a way to put a positive spin in the worst situations. And intently listen when you had to get something off your chest. He was a fantastic, even if his energy was a little much to deal with a lot of time. I loved having him around. He was known in our course as the bug guy, because he was absolutely obsessed with bugs. Flies, spiders, pill bugs, anything that had a lot of legs. Ed was always obscure facts whenever a weird bug he'd point out on the wall, or hanging from the ceiling. Despite his bizarre obsession, he was a blast. He promised when our uni course ended, he would stay in touch. Even though I was moving away to another state, so we couldn't be able to meet face to face often. And that's when he stopped talking to me at first. He'd just leave me on read, or only respond a week or two after I sent a message. But one day, I tried to message him, and I was blocked. It was weird. We hadn't fallen out. What little talk we did was friendly, and not too different from how we used to joke and mess around in uni. So to me, this made no sense. For a while, I occasionally tried to get back in contact through a mutual friend, but everyone I had access to never responded either, or told me the same thing, that they'd also been blocked. I decided to put that behind me and just get on with my own things. Maybe he was going through a tough time and needed some time alone, or maybe he just wanted to move on entirely and leave uni behind. In time, I kind of forgot about it. There was no drama, so it didn't stick in my mind. I've drifted away from a few friends over the years, so it just felt like another instance of that. Skip forwards to a few weeks ago. I was coming down from my home, staying in a holiday home for a couple of weeks to visit some friends, the very few I managed to stay in contact with. We were planning a day out, shopping, a trip to the beach, and a meal at a local restaurant. When we were talking about the meal, one of them brought up Ed, joking that if he were coming, we wouldn't have to pay for a thing. There was a brief moment in stillness of the chat, before another friend asked if anyone heard from Ed at all since the end of the course. Almost everyone said from the day that the course ended, Ed had vanished. Everyone, except me and another friend of mine, Mike. I told them I had contact with Ed for a few months after before he cut me off, but what Mike said took me back a little. Ed hadn't blocked him. The two hadn't talked since the end of our course, but he still has an open line of communication. At the time, this sent a shiver down my spine, but I thought it was the excitement of potentially being able to meet up with him again, through Mike. We asked if Mike could reach out to him and ask him if he'd like to meet up. I didn't get a response, but we looked through his profile on the site, and it was odd to say the least. Posts from around the time he blocked me indicated he moved away from the home, but none of these photos ever showed him in the house. It was always in a wooded location, or out in a restaurant with people I didn't recognize. The content of his account is what I found most strange. In between the occasional photo he'd posted with strange, indulging backgrounds, like creepy-looking kaleidoscopes of red and purple bramble branches, but the audio that made my spine itch. It sounded like some sort of messed-up violin music. It was disjointed and jarring, but intentionally so, making it strangely hypnotic to listen to. We knew he really liked music, but he never played an instrument in the time we knew him. So this wasn't the most surprising development, but the sound of it certainly was. We came to the conclusion that he was trying to get a following for his strange music, probably wanting to make a career from it. After finishing up our discussion for plans, finally setting up a meeting 2 days later, I tried to get to my bed. but I found myself thinking about Ed's music. The uncomfortably enticing rhythms repeating in my head. I lay there, trying to sleep for hours, until I heard my phone ring from across the room. I wasn't getting any sleep, so I may as well see what the notification was. Dragging myself out of bed and across the room where my phone was resting on the table. I nearly dropped my phone when I saw what the notification was. It was a message from Ed. Just a simple, "Hey." So casual you think he hadn't cut me off for years. I sat down on my bed staring at the message for a bit. I didn't really know how to reply. All this time, and he just says, "Hey." I was trying to figure out how to respond when he sent another message. Leaving me unread? Come on now, you don't need to sink to my level. This was the Ed who had vanished from my life. This simple message was practically dripping with a sense of humor. We talked for a while, catching up and talking about the good old days. The conversation felt like I had never left, like he had never faded from my life. I had so many questions, but I held most of them back. I didn't want to cut the conversation short by bringing up why he initially blocked me. The last question I did ask during the exchange was, "So me and a few other friends are meeting up in a couple days to hang out and catch up. Would you want to come along too?" He didn't respond for a while. I started to worry that I'd scared him off, that proposing a face-to-face meeting was too much for him after all these years. But soon, I got my response. "I'm really sorry. It'd be great to get the gang back together. I'm really sorry. It'd be great to get the gang back together, but I have stuff to do that day, and I don't deal too well with crowds." I was a bit disappointed with this response, but before I could say anything else, there was another message. "I can't do the full group meetup, but I'm going for an evening wander at the local forest tomorrow, tarantula spotting. If you want to join me, we could meet up and hang out for a bit. If I'm being entirely honest, I have something that I want to get off my chest in person." This shocked me. I was surprised by how eager he was to meet up after cutting me off entirely for years. But at the same time, I was excited at the prospect of meeting up with him again. I didn't know when I'd be back in this state, and I wanted to seize the chance of rekindling an old friendship. I agreed, and we arranged a time and a place to meet in the forest, me buzzing with the excitement of seeing him again. I lay back down in my bed, even less likely to fall asleep now, but as I lay there, I thought about what he said at the end of his invite. I have something I want to get off my chest. A detail I had failed to mention earlier was his crush on me, or at least what everyone thought was a crush, giving me obvious preferential treatment. Everyone knew I knew. It seems the only one who thought it was a secret was Ed. I dreaded the idea that when we met he would ask me out, or admit having feelings for me. I didn't feel the same way, but I planned to let him down easy if that's what he wanted to say, and I really hoped we can continue being friends after that. But I knew things would be awkward for a while after. I shot Mike a message telling him that I got back in touch with Ed and that I'd be meeting him the next evening. Mike expressed some concern, saying meeting up in a forest in the evening seemed suspicious to him, but this was Ed. I assured Mike that I trusted Ed, but if I didn't show up for the day out, he'd know who the perpetrator was. The next day, I woke up and I felt a strange, foreboding aura hanging in the air. I pinned it as being some kind of nervous feeling. With meeting Ed coming up later in the day, I took a brief walk around the perimeter of my holiday home. It was a nice place, with a lovely large garden, which I had promised myself I would give a brief explore when I had a free moment. There were trees around the edge of the garden, acting as a natural fence between the gorgeously maintained garden and the fields surrounding the property. I was walking alongside trees when I noticed something in the corner of my eyes, a glistening strand of web, waving in the wind. I turned to it and took out my phone. I thought if I could get a picture of an interesting bugger spider, I could show it to Ed later. A conversation of some sort. But when I saw one, I parted the thick layer of leaves made me yelp with surprise. There were spiders everywhere. And I don't mean there were a few webs, I mean there were spiders in every branch of the tree, every inch of the trunk, and thick layers of web in between the leaves, with even more spiders. I stumbled backwards and tried to process what I saw, breathing heavily from the shock. I carefully made my way around the rest of the garden, using a stick to part the leaves of the rest of the trees, and I found the same thing. Every tree, every single one, was coated with spiders. From the exposed roots to the branches, the arachnid webbing always suddenly stopped for the tips of the branches, concealing the creeping coating behind the bright leaves. I took several photos of them, intending to show Ed later, even getting a video where I poked the phone camera into multiple of the trees using my selfie stick, ready to drop it if a single spider scuttled onto it, toward my hand. Looking back at it, the thing that freaks me out the most is how still they were. Since then, I've seen videos of social bugs where they're constantly moving, scuttling around over each other with a frenzy of legs and mandibles, but these spiders were all completely still. Even when I parted the leaves and poked at the camera within inches of them, the most I got was a leg or two, lazily waving in the air. This added the sense of unease I was feeling that day, to the point where I almost canceled on Ed, but my excitement for seeing my old friend kept me from canceling. I almost heard Ed in my head, putting a positive spin on this. Well, at least you had something amazing to show me. I'd love to see a tree covered in spiders, and I believed he would be able to reassure me this is a normal, harmless spider habitat. I prepared to leave for the forest shortly after, still a little shaken. I just wanted to get on the move and put that uneasy feeling behind me. It was a short drive to the forest, but after pulling up in the parking lot, I had little way to walk before I got where we'd agreed to meet, a place we used to hang out and smoke a little before we complete our uni work. It was a small clearing with some strange tree stumps, partly rotted, but perfect shape for seats. There was even a stump that had rotten in the middle, hollowed it out for a bowl shape, and as unsanitary as it was, we put our snacks in there so we could pluck out a treat or two whenever we got the munchies. I sent Ed a message as I walked to tell him I was on my way to the clearing, but I had no signal, no 5G. So when the message wouldn't send, I thought nothing of it. We'd arranged a time, and if I were a little late, I knew he'd wait for me. On the way there, the sun was setting through the trees. I noticed several large tarantulas perched on the side of trees and logs, sat on the side of the trail. They made me feel a little uneasy, but it made sense that Ed wanted to come here for tarantula spotting. Something I noticed yet again was after this whole ordeal is that none of them moved. Usually when you think of a tarantula, you'd imagine them creeping forward with that slow, deliberate, crawling gait, carefully feeling out the world around it like a blind man with a painful bite. But these tarantulas were all completely still, out in the open, as if just frozen in place, just like the spiders on the trees earlier. But I didn't make any connection at the time. I just kept walking, scanning the ground to avoid stepping on angry spiders. Just then, I could have sworn my mind was playing a trick on me, but I heard that music, the jarring, disjointed string instrument. It was only just on the edge of my perception, so it took me a while to notice, but as I approached the clearing, it got louder, and I realized I wasn't imagining it. I thought Ed must be at the clearing, playing some music whilst he waited. My excitement grew. I wanted to ask him about his new musical hobby, and catch up with all the time we had lost. My stride grew faster as I approached, the hypnotic aberration of the sound calling me to the place I knew, where so many fond memories had been formed, towards a dear friend I missed more than I had ever realized. I parted the branches in front of me, the music blaring in my ears, entwined through every vein of my body, pulling me forward. When it hit me, a sudden shockwave of quiet, the music still playing, was somehow muted, and there he was, sat on one of the larger stumps near the middle. Ed. The Ed I remembered, but something was off. He was gone. What little of his face I could see through the shaggy, unkempt beard, long, messy, strawberry blonde hair, looked colorless. He wore a brown woolen jumper, torn around the collar, and with one of the sleeves completely shredded, revealing a malnourished, long, thin arm. With this bony arm he was holding a strange instrument. It looked like an odd cross between a violin and an archery bow, with multiple strings stretching between the neck and the body of the thing, which was just sit against his shoulder, akin to the way a violinist holds their violin under their chin. He played it with a violin bow, carefully sawing the thing across the strings, in an act of discordant elegance. I stood there, watching him play for several seconds, before I realized he was staring right into my eyes, not even twitching upon my arrival. He must have noticed my realization at that moment, because he stopped playing and rested the instrument on his torn-up cargo pants. "Hey," he said, baring his teeth in a familiar, awkward grin. "Been a while, huh?" I struggled to find my words for the moment, but eventually I blurted it out. Yeah, not by choice, Mr. Vanishing Act. There was a moment of silence before Ed burst into a hearty laugh, instantly dispelling the awkward tension I'd felt upon my arrival, and making me feel as if it was only yesterday we had been smoking here, and eating trashy snacks out of the tree stump. Get over here and take a seat, Ed bellowed as he gestured to a near stump with one of his spindly arms. I brought snacks aplenty. I practically skipped over, seeing the packets of snacks resting in the rotted balsam, just as they did it all those years before. The nostalgia as we talked was blissful. Despite looking like a gangly homeless man, Ed hadn't changed a bit. He was exactly the same as he was, same humor, same voice, same speech patterns. Even the way he'd always throw the first snack he'd opened into his mouth like something from a cartoon remained the same. His instrument eventually came up in conversation. I asked him, "So you got a new hobby? I heard some of your music through your Instagram account, but honestly, I've never seen anything like whatever that is. It's really cool, but what the heck is it?" A look of pride surged across his face, and he straightened his back, towering over me, and making me remember how much taller he was than me. "I made it myself," he spoke in a deep, mockingly polished voice. "I call it the Arcaday, based on my favorite spider." I laughed. Of course you would name it after a spider. It was the most Ed thing he could do. Ed laughed alongside me, whilst cramming a Pop-Tart into his mouth, before positioning the instrument as if to play it again. At this point, the sunlight was nearly gone. I was wondering if we were actually going to the tranceless spotting before all the light was gone. Hey, so are we actually going tarantula spotting? I saw quite a few on the way here, so it seems like today would be a good day for it? Ed froze for a moment, the bow of his instrument poised to play, before he started rapidly sawing it across the strings, a quiet, chilling, and tension-building tune, akin to the build-up to a scare in a horror movie. "I was hoping we'd have a little more time here," he whispered, barely audible through his music. "Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, we can spend a little bit more time here," I told him. "We don't even need to go tarantula spotting if you just want to hang out here," I proposed. Ed sighed. I looked towards the ghost of the sunlight as it crept over the horizon, now barely piercing the trees. "No, I shouldn't put this off any longer. I can't just pretend like everything's fine forever." Ed spat, as if he was forcing words out of his mouth, back hunch as he continued to play his music, slowly building in volume. "What do you mean?" I said, already internally cringing at the prospect of him confessing some hidden and dying love for me. The tune suddenly changed to a slow, peaceful humming. I could feel the vibration of the strings through my entire body. Ed was looking at the ground, his eyes seeming vacant. "Alyssa," he spoke my name through a rough, serious voice, when I could never hear from him, my own name hitting me like a baseball bat. I needed to listen to what I had to say, in total, without interrupting, still speaking in this unheard, rough tone. I nodded my head, still taken aback by the sudden change in voice and body language. Ed took a deep breath as the last of the sun left the clearing, bathing us in dull, great, late evening light, making Ed look even more gaunt and malnourished. He raised his head and locked eyes with me, still playing his instrument. "For years, I hunted you," he said with the certainty of a detective accusing someone of murder. "From the moment that I met you, even my fixation, my goal, my—" He stopped for a moment, biting his lip before spitting out the words, "my prey." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. It didn't feel real. I was expecting a smile to crack across his face at any second, expecting him to laugh and say, "Just kidding," but it never came. I didn't know what I was feeling, didn't understand what I was doing, Ed said, the look on his face mirroring the confusing churning feeling in my stomach. "I was assessing you every second. I thought maybe I loved you or hated you, but it didn't make any sense to me. Every second I was with you, you were my sole focus. Everything else seemed blurred, unimportant. Everything ceased to exist except you, the path between me and you. I tried to convince myself I loved you, but I acted like that because I cared about you deeply, but I quickly realized I was wrong." I felt a shiver go down my spine as my back reflexively straightened and feet shifted, ready to jump up and run at second notice. Ed looked at me. He knew I was ready to run, but just continued speaking. I realized I was hunting you. I learned your strengths and your weaknesses. He paused before looking down at my shoes. Like how you can run fast but struggle with rough terrain, looking across the tree line. Rough terrain like roots on a forest floor. His gaze slowly shifting back to lock eyes. He looked hollow in the low light. I couldn't make out his pupils, but I knew he was staring directly at me. I questioned myself. Why? Why am I hunting? Ed said, in a chilling mockery of question. Am I a psychopath? A cannibal? Maybe. Maybe I'm a killer who just found his perfect quarry. He straightened his back and let out a chuckle, but it wasn't his usual chuckle. It was low, raspy, and it didn't seem to come from his mouth. It sounded lower, like it was being projected directly from his lungs. No, he said, slowly slumping back down to his usual hunched position. I realized soon after, it was nature, he muttered. The tune he was playing picked up in speed slightly. At this point, I couldn't take this. I blurted out, "So you want to be murderer, huh? You want to kill me because you're naturally evil? Is that what you're saying?" His face dropped. He stopped playing his instrument. Ed's blank eyes stared at me for an unbearably long time. There was a complete silence, other than the creaking of trees in the wind. That's when I noticed him, the cracks in his skin. A series of symmetrical cracks on his face, looping under his eyes, across his forehead, and spreading across his cheeks, looking like an unbearably wide smile on his exposed arm. I could see more of these cracks, like joints in a doll. They divided his hands into segments, with wet, slimy-looking black flesh visible in the gaps. "I thought," he murmured under his breath. "I told you not to interrupt." His mouth barely moving as he spoke. I shifted in my seat. I had no idea what to do. Was he about to kill me? Why would he tell me all this if he's just gonna slit my throat or strangle me? I managed to croak out, "Why are you doing this? Why tell me all this? Is this some kind of sick fantasy to you?" Ed continued to stare at me, yet again, filling the air with a terrible silence, until he suddenly leapt back into his music, making me jump from the sudden burst of sound. He continued to speak, as his melody became more disjointed. "Have you ever heard of the Mira Markne?" Ed said, in a more playful tone, but dripping with odd malice. "No, I haven't," I replied, afraid of the sudden change in his attitude. He leapt into an explanation. Myrmecomorphy is the term for another organism mimicking an ant, the most common which are Myrmacnae. He raised his head slightly, the little light remaining, glinting off the damp flesh visible through the cracks in his face, before saying in a low, reverberated voice, "Ant mimicking spiders," his eyes narrowing. I noticed at this point that I was shaking badly, obviously afraid. Ed didn't seem to care. He continued his monologue. "These spiders, they evolved to mimic the bodies and movements of various different ants, with the purpose of getting close to their ant prey without setting off any alarms." I realized that he wasn't right from the second I saw cracks in his skin, but the sickening realization dawned on me as he was muttering his next few sentences, looking away from me, almost as if musing to himself. I always did wonder why everyone else had parents. Just the concept didn't sit right with me. So impersonating my parents over the phone to get into school, college, and university just seemed right. The creature sitting across from me, who I spent years studying alongside, who I told my darkest secrets and shared my highest and lowest moments with, was a grotesque, human-mimicking spider. I could see it now. The cracks in his skin were joints in his exoskeleton. His visible arm looked more like a pale spider leg with a human hand on the end than a normal human arm. Were those signs always there? Or somehow did nobody notice these features? I felt numb, but with a dull sensation in my throat that made me feel like I'd puke at any moment. I managed to muster the strength to talk. "So you never cared about me? About anyone then? You were just mimicking us? So you could hunt us?" At this, Ed snapped his face back to me. "No," he spat, causing me to recoil on my feet. "No, I cared. I still care." His face twisted into a contorted mess, the cracks widening as what I believe was a pained look spread across his face. I found out I was this. I found out I was different. and it hurt. I cared about you, even if it was just mimicking emotion. It felt real to me, and I, at this point, I cut Ed off, blurting out, "Then why are you telling me this? You know I'm gonna go straight to the police if you let me walk away. You literally just told me you wanted to kill me." Ed, still playing his cacophonia tune, lowered his head and spoke softly and slowly. "All I've been able to think about is you. No matter what I did, no matter who I met, I kept looping back to hunting you." He looked up to me. "Do you know, Alyssa?" Looking like every word was hurting him. "How many times in the dark winter evenings I have stood meters from you, hidden by the darkness on the other side of the window, poised and ready to strike." I felt the adrenaline surge through me as every inch of my body tensed at this. He must have noticed the sudden urge and lowered his head, saying, "Yes, yes, I know where you live." I wanted to scream, call out for help, yell at Ed, call him a monster, but I knew that wouldn't help me. "Why didn't you?" I started, but Ed cut me off. "I didn't want to. I told you. I care. I don't want to hurt you. I don't want to hurt anyone." Ed raised his head. His eyes became oily black, the eyes of a spider, but there were tears running along the cracks and joints of his face. "I hid, out here in the woods, barely communicating with anyone so I wouldn't want to hunt anyone else. But his face suddenly shifted to a deadly calm. "But Alyssa, I can't get you out of my head. I need this torment to end." "What? What do you mean?" I asked the spider, knowing that the answer would be, "Alyssa, I need to hunt you, Alyssa." His voice started to distort, lowering in pitch. "Alyssa, I need you to run, to flee, hide, and don't stop hiding." He suddenly stopped playing his instrument and spoke in a deep, emotionless voice. "I will give you a chance to flee. If you escape me, you prove yourself difficult to catch, I'll no longer want you." Before I could stop myself, I asked a question I didn't want the answer to. "What happens if you catch me?" The spider stayed horrendously still for several seconds before slowly opening its mouth, as a pair of long curved fangs slid from either side of his jaw. The longer I watched, the more the fang came out, until they were nearly as long as my forearm, before suddenly they vanished back into the spider's face. I realized tears were coming down my face at this point. I was terrified to my core that the person, no, this bug, who had deceived me for so many years, was about to kill me. He spoke again in an almost commanding tone. "I will give you a head start, so you will stand a chance. You will know I'm hunting you when you no longer hear my music." With that, he began to play by far the most disjointed, horrendous tune I had heard from him. I was frozen, processing everything for a few moments. I was trying to think of something, anything I could say, but when he spoke again, in an incredibly nonchalant tone, I called this piece ensnared, looking straight into my eyes, as he said, "It's not a very long song." Taking the hint, my body flew into overdrive, pumped up on adrenaline. I darted into the darkened tree line, stumbling through the trees and foliage, getting cuts on my hands, arms, and legs. At one point, even stumbling face first into a tree and breaking my nose. At the time, I didn't even notice with the adrenaline blocking out all sensation. I could hear the music in the distance, getting fainter and fainter, praying it would fade away into the distance as I ran, but no such luck. It felt like hours, but was likely only a couple of minutes when I heard the music come to an abrupt halt, bringing with it a vein of complete silence and absolute fear. I found myself muttering, "No, no," under my breath, but I quickly silenced myself. I didn't know how fast he could move. I didn't know how well he could track me. I was running blind in the dark forest, pursued by a giant spider. I ran and ran. I didn't want to stop, but the fatigue was getting to me. So I found a ditch and hid in the shadows for a moment, away from the moonlight, which had since spread itself across the ground, and that's when I saw him, crawling along on all fours, his torn-up clothing hanging from his spindly frame, and his wretched instrument slung along his back. Until that moment, probably due to the many layers of baggy clothing he used to wear. I had never noticed how long his limbs were compared to his body. The way he moved, it will stick with me until I die. His arms flicked down from him before slowly pulling him forwards, as his legs dragged along behind him, lazily keeping his body from touching the ground. He was so close to me. I held my breath and tried to stop shaking, as I saw a long, pointed red spike out of his mouth, poking the ground as some liquid. I felt icy spider legs grip my heart as I realized it was blood. My blood, from the cuts on my hands and legs. He was using it to track me. He started to slowly move towards me, unknowingly about to end the hunt that had lasted so many years, until his head suddenly jerked up as he spun around and disappeared in the other direction, moving so fast my eyes couldn't track him. Seizing my opportunity, I ran for it. I didn't consider stealth or caution, I just ran. I got so many cuts and bruises on my arms and legs. Oh, my entire body. I must have looked like a zombie. I found the parking lot, but as I did, I heard something in the distance. A scream. A blood-curdling, horrified scream, brought to an abrupt end. And in a moment of utter dread, I realized some poor, unrelated innocent person had just taken the fall for me. I had heard someone. I thought they were me. Almost as a confirmation, I heard the distant sound of Ed yelling in a combination of rage and, I think, horror that he killed someone who wasn't me. I'll never understand him. But as much of a monster he was, I know he didn't want to be a killer. I got in my car and drove off as fast as I could. I didn't look at my speedometer. I didn't care where I was driving. I even ran down a couple of road signs and just kept going. I needed to get out of there. I didn't even pick up what little I had at my holiday home. I just drove and drove, heading back to my home. Aside from stopping at a gas station, the drive home was uneventful. My mind, however, was anything but. My thoughts were racing. I didn't know how to process everything. Giant human mimicking spiders exist. One of them was hunting me. It just killed someone. It should have been me. I was crying so much I could barely see the road. I just wanted to get away. Far, far away from here. Far away from that thing. That's what I did. I packed my bags and fled, leaving for another country the next day. I didn't even check my phone until I was outside of the United States. I wish I had checked it sooner. The scream that I heard in the woods was Mike. There was no signal, no 5G in that forest, so I didn't get Mike's DMs checking in on me. He got worried and came to the woods. I found out from later investigation, Ed had always given Mike the creeps. He was afraid of Ed doing something to me. So we came to the forest. He searched for me. He was trying to protect me. And you'll never know. He's the only reason I got out of that forest alive. It should have been me. I should have died in that shadowy ditch, ripped apart by a face once considered to be my closest friend. I'd carried this guilt and fear with me for years. I know nobody would believe me, but I trust you with this. Even if you think I'm crazy, I don't care. Even if you think I'm crazy, I don't care. I just need to get this out. I just need to tell someone. I fled. I ran. I left the country. But I haven't even proven myself to be too difficult prey to catch. I hear it every night. That piece of music, ensnared. The proof that I would never escape his web. It gets closer every few days. I have a safe room, but I can't hide in there forever.